What is good, YouTube? It's your boy Soul Asher, and today I'm going to help you increase your frames while playing Soulworker online. I have about 8 years in IT, so optimization of applications, servers, databases, whatever, that has kind of been a part of my background. Also the networking, but I'm gonna make this as simple as possible and try and keep everything in layman's terms for you guys. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Let's help you guys optimize your game. Alright, so right now I'm in game, but let's go ahead and open up a web browser. And the first thing that you're always gonna want to check when you want to optimize your game is your network connection. I usually use speedtest.net. It's fairly reliable. What it will do is it will find an optimal server nearby, and once it reaches that optimal server, it's going to test your upload, download speed, as well as your ping. Usually takes a couple seconds, shouldn't take too long. It really just depends on how quickly you can connect to that server. I'm getting 600 megabytes download. This is while recording, so part of my download and upload rate is currently being utilized. But as you see out here, I have 4 ms. This should actually be much higher for me. My upload speed is actually usually much higher as well. But this is overall still a stable connection, and if my ping is this low and I have this amount of download speed, then I shouldn't have any issues with lag in the game. If you have anything under like 100 megabytes download speed, you're going to experience packet loss. So I wouldn't recommend gaming on anything under like 200, 250 megabytes a second. That's personal preference, right? You know, that's opinion based, but I can guarantee what's not opinion based and what's objective facts here is that you will experience more packet loss on slower internet speeds. And if your ping is high, you're 100% going to be experiencing packet loss as well as frame drops, because you can't even really connect to the server. So that's number one, making sure your ping is low and your download speed. This doesn't necessarily determine your overall connection to Soulworker, because this isn't connecting to a Soulworker server, but it's connecting to a nearby server. I don't think they have released information on where every single global server is located for Soulworker, but this is just a general test for your internet, right? That way, if you're having issues here, at least you can go to your ISP and determine that it's not the Soulworker server and that it's at least on your end. But if your internet is good, then we can hop into the next section and start optimizing pieces of our own setup, right? So after network, the next most important thing is going to be your graphics. So what you're going to want to do is open up a dxdiag. You can also do that as a run command. You do a run command dxdiag, that's dx diagnostics. You're pulling up a DirectX diagnostics, and which will tell you your processor. But what we're worried about right here, I mean, you should definitely have enough RAM to play the game. That's kind of huge. I want to note that too. Your memory, right? Your memory is going to be huge. If you have anything under 16 gigs of RAM, you you almost have to do this. You're gonna come into PC properties, and from PC properties, you're actually going to go to, actually let's do this the easier way. Go here to File Explorer. From File Explorer, Advanced System Settings. So there's two ways to do that. You can go from this PC properties, or you can go from File Explorer, this PC, into the same screen. It doesn't really matter, but I think this is the easier way. And then you come into Performance Settings, and you want to adjust your settings for best performance. And what this is doing is stopping your Windows OS from utilizing features that will actually hinder the performance and add more to your RAM or add more to your processing power. So this is optimizing your computer for that. And then your virtual memory, your page file. Mine is automatically set because I have so much RAM. This is something that you could manually set to have more space available, but I don't need to because I have 32 gigs. You're gonna want to do more research on that. That way you can understand how much VRAM you need to adequately allocate to a game while also running other applications on your system. For me, 13 gigs is more than enough. Almost 14 gigs is more than enough, but I have 32 gigs of RAM on my computer. So, and I also have a 4 GB card, which also counts as VRAM. So after we've done looking at those settings, we're gonna come back to our DXDAG. We're gonna go into Display 1. Currently, you'll see here that I have a Radeon RX 580. These newer graphics cards are not optimized to play Soulworker because Soulworker released years ago. The new technology on these cards isn't even really optimized or compatible with Soulworker, and we're gonna come back to that a bit later. But keep in mind, like I said, this is my graphics card, and my drivers are up to date as of May 10th of 2021. So that means I've updated my graphic drivers recently. If your graphic drivers are more than like a month old, chances are you missed an update and your graphic drivers are actually out of date. So what you're gonna wanna do is, whether you're AMD or NVIDIA, you just Google the website, or, so right here, you'll see, this is my AMD bar, and it's Alt-Z. I believe it's the same command for NVIDIA, but there's always a way to check for updates within your actual graphic software. However, what you can do also is just Google them. So AMD RX 580 graphic drivers. That's my graphics card, and I'm Googling graphic drivers. So it brings me to the official AMD site, and I'm on Windows 10. You can also check that in DXDAG or System Information. It says Windows 10 Pro, and then System Information will also give you Microsoft Windows 10 Pro 19042 build. It gives me the full breakdown, and then my system type tells me the type of socket which my processor is on. It's a 64-bit based processor, so that means I'm on 64-bit version of Windows OS 10 running 19042. But anyway, so we're in Windows 10 64-bit. So what I would do is I would download the software recommended for my specific graphics card, or I could auto detect and let it install. Two ways to do it, like I said. whichever one, it shouldn't really matter. It just depends how tech savvy you are. If you're not as savvy, don't do it manually. Let the application do it. If you know how to clean your drivers, do a full driver clean, like uninstall all your drivers and then manually install it. That's the best way to ensure that you won't get artifacting drivers or artifacting graphical errors. Okay, so after drivers, we're gonna come back to our AMD settings, but we're actually going to open up the full screen here. Now it says I have 30 frames in Soulworker, but that's only because I'm always streaming and it doesn't actually capture my frames correctly. If I come into Soulworker right here, you'll see at the top left corner, I actually have 100 frames, over 100 frames. Whereas before I optimized, I was probably at like, I don't know, 40, 30, because it would just drop consistently. But after optimization, I've got the game to where I can stream in 60 frames, and also I'll show you my resolution. Resolution is 1440p. So I'm streaming in 1440p, downscaling to 1920 by 1080p, and I'm still running at a solid 60 frames when I'm streaming. However, it only detects 30 because of however their algorithm is detecting frames. It doesn't detect it properly when I'm streaming. But anyway, not getting too deep into that. So now that we're in our AMD settings, right? We go to the gaming tab, and we can tune Soulworker specifically.
Here we go.
That's kind of vast. But there are global settings in which you can also change if you're more advanced, but we're gonna focus on Soulworker today. We're not gonna do the automatic tune. I'm gonna show you manual settings. So what we're gonna start with here is a graphics profile. For us AMD users, always set to esports. Once you set to esports, it's gonna copy most of my settings, but I'm still gonna go through each setting because I did make some custom changes. Radeon anti-lag is great, enabled. Radeon chill, limit FPS to save power. No, we never want to limit FPS. We never want to sync FPS. We never want to do that. That's a bad way to optimize the game, because when you experience frame drops and your FPS is limited, then if you're limited at, like, let's say you're capped at 60 frames, when you experience frame drops, then you're going to go to like 30. Whereas if you're at 100 frames consistently and you experience frame drops, you'll drop to maybe 80, maybe 90, and you'll still be at high frames. So we never want to limit frames. We always want the highest frame possible. Radeon image sharpening, personal preference. I like the way it changes my graphics. It makes Soulworker look pretty good, even though it's an older game. Radeon enhanced sync. This is critical. It reduces both visual tearing and lag. This is optimizing your game. It's optimizing Soulworker for my graphics card, because Soulworker does not optimize for my graphics card. And most games aren't really gonna optimize for your specific graphics card unless it's a AAA game. Soulworker is not necessarily a AAA game. This is Lion Game's first game. So you gotta think. Chances of them actually getting with the developers of these graphics cards and optimizing for their game is low. Games like Call of Duty and Battlefield, they can do groundbreaking technology because they're optimized. Fortnite is extremely optimized. League is optimized. Soulworker, not so much. We have to optimize ourselves. So AMD FreeSync, off. These are monitor settings. It's monitor specific. If your monitor supports FreeSync, whether it's AMD, whether it's NVIDIA G-Sync, turn it off. That limits your frames. It captures frames. It's bad. It's vertical refresh technology. It's bad for gaming, okay? Because it will limit your frames, and when you experience frame drops, you will lag. We don't want it. Turn it off. Scaling mode. That's your global settings. That's where that comes in handy, but scaling is not important for like performance. Integer scaling, disabled because you don't want to put more stress on your GPU for changing the pixelation or aliasing of your integers. So I want to disable that. And then my other settings are disabled too. They're just not important for performance, right? But we can also go here to advanced settings, anti-aliasing. You can use the application settings for this. However, if you have not so good computer, if you have less than like 4 gigs of RAM, you're not going to be able to like process anti-aliasing and tessellation and all this stuff that is available in Soulworker and most other games. Just turn it down, dude. Don't use application settings. You might want to override application settings and then set it to adaptive multi-sampling or super sampling, but I'm on multi-sampling because it looks pretty decent. But I'm just using the application settings because Soulworker's anti-aliasing is not important. It's not necessary at all for Soulworker, to be honest with you. Your filtering method for improving texture clarity, I have that disabled because Soulworker is not very compatible with texture enhancements because my graphics card is DX12, whereas it appears Soulworker is like DX9. That would be why the game's only like 10 gigs. So we don't really want to mess with the textures because it's not compatible. Texture filtering quality, it's on standard, but like I said, that's disabled anyway. Service format optimization, you want that enabled because this allows the driver to override application and choose optimal texture formats to improve performance. That's literally what this is for. It's literally what it says here, right? So whereas we disabled the filtering for the games, we disabled anisotropic filtering level. We disabled that, right? But this is going to allow our graphics drivers to actually change the way the textures, like the grass, the buses, different objects in the game are going to be optimized via our graphics card. So we're not improving the quality, we are optimizing the quality of our textures, which is going to give us more performance, obviously, right? And then for tessellation mode, you want to override application settings because Soulworker does not have good tessellation, or maybe it doesn't have really any good tessellation optimization for your graphics drivers, because when I change this option, I noticed a very significant stabilization of my frame. This is controlling how the driver interacts with tessellation settings in the game. And Soulworker having such old technology, you're going to want to override application settings. And me, I have it set to 8 times because I have, again, a very decent graphics card. But if you have less than 4 gigs of VRAM or graphics, you're going to want to drop this to maybe 4 times or 2 times, right? You're going to want to lower that. And you want to override application settings no matter what, because Soulworker is not going to be optimized for tessellation on any graphics driver that's anywhere current or near the current market of relativity. Open GL triple buffering disabled. Okay, you guys, and these are AMD settings. Settings aren't going to be exactly the same for NVIDIA, but what I can recommend for NVIDIA users, go into your graphics settings and make sure that you're set for performance within the display settings and global settings for applications. Most of your settings you'll have, they're going to be very similar to what I've said here. It's just I can't show you the layout because I'm on AMD right now. Okay, you guys, so that was everything based upon performance and gaming for Soulworker. The other settings are not really as important. I wouldn't recommend overclocking or anything like that. I definitely will not overclock because Soulworker is doesn't require me to overclock my processor, and I'm always streaming, so if I was to overclock, I would put more stress on my system. Don't want to do it. So after those graphic settings, your monitor settings, you've turned off FreeSync, you've turned off G-Sync, you've updated your graphic settings, we're gonna hop in game here for a second. We're gonna check our in-game settings. We're on our level 64 gen here. I turned the UI scale down, and this is personal preference. I think it was much higher than this when I first logged in, but that's the first thing I wanted to change. My mini map is fixed. Those aren't related to graphics, really. The UI kind of is, because the smaller the UI, the less you have to load on your RAM. The rotate mini map is just a personal preference. The display info for ally damage, turn that off, because that's extra things to render for your it's extra thing for your processor to essentially render on the screen, and it places it on your RAM. UI is always going to be RAM heavy, so the more things you can remove from the UI, the better. You just don't really need to see your ally damage anyway. I have FPS counter on right now, but I usually keep that off. The less UI on the screen, the better. That's all I can say. So help window, we can disable that. Camera and output skills, turn that off. Camera and output skills is just extra things to the process, it lags. Camera shake off. Camera sensitivity, I have it on too. And then outside of the game settings, we come over here to graphic settings. I play on borderless full screen, which is entire screen mode, 1440p. Everything's on high for me because the in-game settings are just not that demanding. Shadows I have on projection. Circle looks really bad, so I like projection so I can have somewhat of a shadow. These are all 50-50-50. The glow and like all the anti-aliasing stuff, like it's here. Destructive physics, they're here. They're not huge, demanding. Vertical sync, turn it off. Vertical sync is bad. You have to make sure that is off. That is not like #1 thing damn near your graphic settings. Vertical sync will limit your FPS, and it will cause you to have frame drops. Like I said, and I keep explaining, I can't stress that enough. Do not use vertical sync, it is bad. Motion blur, personal preference. I like motion blur because it makes everything look as though it's real-time action. Output ally player effects. This is largely preference, but it does affect your performance. It largely affects the performance of your machine, so I highly suggest you turn output all player effects off. And outside of that, you guys, the only other recommendations I can make is to make sure you're cleaning your computer every day. The more you use it, the more you need to clean it. I personally use CCleaner, and essentially it'll just do a health check, and then I'll also do a registry check, and then it'll remove any like missing registry errors. And I also use advanced system care, in which I'll place the link for these two applications in the description. These are recommended, but they're not mandatory like the majority of other things I was mentioning in this guide. But cleaning your computer some way, if you don't know how to clean your computer, you need some type of way to do so. You need some type of way to remove temporary files, remove junk files, and to essentially just help you, like if you're not on a solid state, you're gonna have to defragment. There's a lot of features that could be discussed that these applications are gonna do for you. But if you don't know how to do that, then use the application. If you do, you don't really need it. But CCleaner is a really good application, you guys. So yeah, outside of that, you guys, that's everything I wanted to show you. Thanks for watching. Peace and love. And let me know in the comment section below if this helped you out.